And we're live.
Okay, thank you. This is Senate Government Operations. We are back and it is still Tuesday, February 8th. And oh my goodness, we have the whole contingency here. Wow. We are looking at the Brattleboro charter change, and Representative Anthony, were you the floor reporter? You are muted.
That is correct, Senator. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the way we should do this is we should hear your report and then we can hear some background and a bigger picture from the representatives from Brattleboro, if that works for you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, the testimony that I emphasized during my floor report was meant to address the suspicion or the undercurrent of supposing that 16 and 17-year-olds were somehow less up to the task. And the popular view is of young people making decisions on the fly, and that their ability to adjust quickly to surprise or impromptu situations leads them to make oftentimes rash and probably unwise decisions. The testimony that we heard, and I reported this on the floor, was to distinguish, frankly, between two facets of brain work, that is to say, processing information, recognizing an environment, etc. And it is true that young people are overrepresented in certain situations which call upon them to make quick, sudden judgments, that is to say, on the fly. The contrary testimony was there's no evidence to suggest that young people are somehow less efficient and less complete in addressing deliberative kinds of decision-making. That is to say, the testimony that I reported on the floor was that, frankly, these are really quite different brain functions. And while it is true that young people are overrepresented in some kinds of unwise decision-making, it's usually characterized by that decision-making, which is made impromptu, in a rush, on the fly, and in unexpected and surprise situations, whether they involve motor vehicles or whatever. You know the statistics. However, there's no evidence to show that sitting around in a representative context, which is what these folks would be entering if we go ahead with the modification, includes the phrase young voters. In that context, there's no evidence to suggest that a 17-year-old is somehow less able to process the kind of information, formulating policy, weighing the balance of interests, et cetera, that is the meat and potatoes of municipal policy making and ordinance construction. And that was the message, basically, I delivered to the floor. It sadly became quite partisan. If you look at the calendar, you could see that. But anyway, I was trying to offset the popular misconception that somehow or another 17-year-olds routinely make bad decisions. That's not so. It's so in certain contexts, but not in others. And that was my report to the House.
Great, thank you. Do you remember what the vote of was in the town? Or
I would defer to Representative Kornheiser for that. I do not. It passed handily, but I can't give you the numbers.
Thank you, Representative. So, which of you erstwhile Brattleboro reps want to? First of all, welcome to our committee. We never see you in our committee. We can tell where you're sitting, however.
Tell by the background.
Uh-huh. So who wants to lead off here?
I'm happy to answer that first question. So
Sure.
Representative Kornheiser of Brattleboro, and as you'll see by the presence of all three of us, this is an issue that's very important to our committee and we've been working on for quite a while now. Brattleboro residents approved Article 2, which was the youth vote article, on March 5th of 2019, which was quite a few years ago, if you can do the math, on a vote of 908 to 408. So it really passed with quite a large majority. And then I can talk about some of the thinking behind it and sort of the history of how Brattleboro got to this, if folks are interested. Is that helpful?
Yeah, we do have, and we have about 15 or 20 minutes.
Great. I definitely don't think the three of us can fill up all those minutes, but I'm sure you'll have some questions.
Oh, yes, I heard you fill it up before.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. So this initiative was started probably about a decade ago by a collection of youth at the high school who really wanted to get much more engaged in civil debate and participation, and know that essentially that voting is habitual, and that a person who votes in their first election that they're eligible in is much more likely to continue voting consistently. And when we have youth when youth are able to vote in their home community at home while they're still attending school regularly, when they're still have a more regular routine in their lives than they might have in their early 20s, at least in reference to my own life. I've certainly had a greater routine when I was 17 than I did when I was 20. It means they're more likely to continue participating and continue feeling really connected to that community. And so as we think about Vermont demographics, as we think about what it means to empower youth in their lives, and for them to build a community that really values youth and values youth voice and values the needs of youth, we really want to turn to youth to be participating in those issues and to be building those habits of civic engagement. As they worked with their high school on this issue and really got deeply engaged, they were able to work with social studies teachers and civics teachers at the high school to get them engaged, who really saw it as a powerful opportunity to continue teaching civics in a more dynamic way at the school, because there was a real life lesson available to those students to participate and then sort of see the proceeds of their action to really vote. One of the things that's been fun to watch the debate play out in Brattleboro is to see how nonpartisan it is in Brattleboro, that not all youth trust each other to vote, and not all youth were on board with this, that it really was, however, the vast majority of Brattleboro voters voted for this. As I'm sure this committee knows, as I know our GovOps committee understands, Brattleboro has a unique form of town government. We have a representative town meeting. Brattleboro's marketing slogan for many years was Brattleboro, the one and only. And that really very much applies to many things about our fair town, but it especially applies to our representative town meeting structure, where voters vote on town meeting day to elect members who then serve at our town meeting. And so this youth vote would enable youth 16 and 17 to both vote in those elections and to become members of our representative town meeting structure, which once we're all in the room really functions exactly like any other town meeting, as well as serving on our select board. It does not impact any of our school votes or actually our trash district, which are both larger municipalities that are not included in this charter change. Tristan, Molly, what did I forget?
I don't think you forgot anything, but I would just like to add that there is a long tradition in Brattleboro of students being engaged in issues, starting with, when my children were in the high school, there was some legendary social studies teachers who got the students engaged in a number of different issues, child labor. They worked with Bernie Sanders' office. They went to Washington. I think that having the opportunity to vote would really sort of cement that kind of activity in the high school. I don't know exactly what's going on there now, but I do know that one of our former pages is now head of is she chair of the town Democratic Committee, Emily? Lily?
She's vice chair.
Vice chair. Anyway, I think there is a tradition there, and I think that having this this vote would definitely just enhance that.
Tristan?
I don't have anything to add. I think they've made the case beautifully. I just appreciate your attention to this, and I know it is very meaningful for the youth in our community.
So to follow up on Molly's comment about the long tradition, it was the kids at Brattleboro High School who they belonged to an organization, I think it was called CLIA, and they were
Yeah.
the ones that got us to pass legislation that said that the state in its purchasing would not buy products that were made with child labor. And in fact, it wasn't just, what's the word? Feel good, that's not the word, but it was meaningful because there was a contract for, I believe it was uniforms for the prison facilities that was actually turned down by the BGS commissioner because they couldn't verify that they had not been produced without child labor. That was a number of years ago. So they have been, yeah. So any other questions, committee? Yes, Allison?
First of all, it's a treat to see you all. It's lovely to have you here. I'm missing you. And second, I understand any of us who've had children who have watched their development and watched us try to empower them and engage them in civics I think are sympathetic to this. On the other hand, as you know, much of our work in our judicial world is coming to appreciate that brain development, particularly in young men, doesn't really fully happen until they're about 25, and that the brain is then so we're doing, as you know, in two different arenas of legislative work, both taking the age up and even in this committee we're taking the age up in different measures, and here we are reducing the age for something that many of us consider sort of a sacred right and one of our duties as citizens in this country and in this state. So I would just appreciate you addressing that, those, because it's happening in the House too, those two different polls of brain development and engagement. So
I'm going to suggest that maybe Emily responded to that, but I think that Representative Anthony has already addressed that when he spoke to us about the different types of brain functions.
Yeah, so to repeat what Representative Anthony was saying, maybe with different words, is
maybe I missed that. Maybe I apologize.
I am not an expert at brain science by any means, but my understanding is that voting depends on something that's called cold cognition, which is a thought out decision process in which 16-year-olds perform just as well as adults. And most of the work that we're doing around criminal justice work, it's much more based in the amygdala and impulse control, which is something that doesn't fully develop until around 27. I don't even have a reference to send you on that. That's just the information that I have on that issue. So please go find a neurosurgeon or something if we need more evidence, but that is my understanding of the situation.
Right, and I apologize because I did hear Peter speak to a piece of that, and I'm sorry, I was having to do something else, and so I apologize for missing some of that.
I used the phrase deliberative kind of cognition. I didn't use the technical cold brain function.
Okay.
But
Got it.
The idea of the context in which a person would find him or herself is one where you're deliberating, you're weighing, you're thinking, you're hardly in forced to be in a situation where you're asked to act impetuously. That's not what representatives do, as we all know. And that was the distinction that I was trying to make during my floor presentation.
Well, you clearly made it because it passed.
Well, yeah, it was a struggle, but yes.
So committee, do we have any more questions?
Actually, I have a question.
Mhm.
This allows young people to vote, obviously. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that they'll be at the representative town meeting though, does it? I mean, they'd have to run for office. They have to run, I don't know if you call it office, but they'd have to run to be
Yeah.
a member of the representative
Correct.
town
Correct.
meeting.
Yes,
Okay, I just want to be clear on that. It's still a great idea, don't get me wrong.
but they,
I
you
wish
know,
we
they
could
can vote,
guarantee that some of them would be there in the thick of things.
but they can vote for the other representatives for town meeting.
But they could run for themselves too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And frankly, they're not very competitive elections. There's usually a number of appointments at the very last minute if you just show up.
Right.
And you, Representative Kornheiser, you might want to point out that the representative body is, what is it, 30 people?
No, it's
No,
150.
150.
Yeah, so we're not talking about a small group. We're talking about a fairly large group, which will be a mix of ages, clearly.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Committee, do you have any questions or comments or are we ready to vote on this? It's been hanging around for now 3 years. Anybody?
Sure.
Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with all due respect to Representatives Kornheiser, Burke, Anthony, and Tolino, I'm still in the position of hoping we reach consensus at some point on what exactly the age of majority is. We seem to be fractured in many ways in that regard. You know, certain things can be done when you're 16, certain things can be done when you're 18, certain things can be done when you're 21. And I did receive, believe it or not, 2 requests from people in Brattleboro over the weekend. This is very unusual because it's a Brattleboro charter and I'm in the Rutland district and really have nothing to do with the Wyndham district, but both the folks asked me to vote no on it. And that's the way I will vote. I don't think that's any surprise, even absent those 2 requests. But I do appreciate the hard work that you did do for the 4 representatives that are here. And I just wanted to be transparent about that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Committee, does anybody else have anything they'd like to say, or does anybody have a motion?
Could I ask a quick question?
Yes.
I mean, in the bill on page 2, it deletes the election of the school directors. And is that because they're, I'm sorry, you know why?
Because
Yes,
of
they
the
don't,
merged district, sorry.
Right, that's what I was getting at. Yeah. So that's a separate election now.
completely separate, and they would not be allowed to vote in that. This is just for local
Right.
town matters.
Right.
Yes.
Anybody want to offer? I will, if nobody else will. Senator Clarkson?
I would move that we approve the Brattleboro Charter as presented, H 361.
Okay, Senator Ram Hinsdale, are you ready to call the roll?
Yes. Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Senator Collmore,
No.
Senator Polina,
Yes.
myself, Senator Ram Hinsdale, yes. Senator White,
Yes,
and that passes 410.
and I would love to report it.
We're shocked.
I want to thank you all so much for considering this and for your vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
all the
very-
hard work.
Thank you.
And Senator
The
White,
kids
if
that-
I might, I wanted to thank you for all your work on the pension task force. I visited over the summer, many weeks.
I know you did. Yeah, we were used to seeing you, but the kids that got this whole initiative going are now well out of their teens and probably in graduate school.
And voting.
You're right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Good
See
to
you
see
later.
you.
Bye.
So Gail, do we have, we were gonna do 122. Do we have people here for that?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do. Chris Winters and Will Senning, and Amarin is not able to join us this afternoon.
I think that this is probably a simple enough bill that Chris or Will could explain to us. So thank you very much. Okay, do you want to, this is S-122. Would you like to tell us about it?
Is that directed to me, Madam Chair?
To either one of you. I'm getting my file.
Excellent. Thank you and good afternoon. For the record, this is Chris Winters, Deputy Secretary of State, and I'm joined by Will Senning. And we were just realizing from the email that Amarin was not going to be here and that you would ask one of us to walk through the bill. So we are ready to do that.
Well, I think we actually walked through it last year.
Oh, okay, good. So do you want me to just start off with our general take on this,
Yeah.
on this bill?
I
Well,
think
sure.
so.
We can say that the Secretary of State's office supports this legislation.
Do you want to first remind us, because we did do a walkthrough, but I
Yeah.
suspect that in the intervening 10 months, our brains
What's
have
happened?
leaked a little bit.
Sure. So this bill is, as I understand it, a bill about the presidential electors and making sure that the electors vote in the way that the state has voted, with a few exceptions. And this bill would clarify that. And so the bill has a couple of bits of language in here that help to tighten up, I think, maybe some gray areas and make clear how this the electors' votes will coincide with the national popular vote if that kicks in. And I could just say that in general, we support the legislation, that it'll clarify the certification process for when the national popular vote comes into play. And it also will clarify and codify the process of binding electors to vote for their party's nominee. And we don't think it represents any shift in policy, but it does bring some needed clarity to the statute. And I would defer to Will Senning here with the chair's permission to talk about more of the specifics or fill in any of the details or answer the questions that you might have about this.
Thank you. Will?
Sure. Hi, committee. Will Senning, Director of Elections, for the record. And do you want me to walk right through it a little bit, Senator White? It can be very quick.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so if you all have the bill in front of you, it actually, I think it technically only has one section, the Act, S-122.
Mhm.
But if you just start on page 1, it's making amendments to section 2731, which is referring to the certificates of election issued by the canvassing committee. And really the language in here that runs from the bottom of page 1 through the top of page 2, in my mind, Senator Pearson might be able to explain it better than I can as the sponsor of the bill, but the way I read this is essentially a statutory cleanup that completes a cross-reference. And what it cross-references is the national popular vote legislation, which you all have already adopted and is part of our law. If you look a couple chapters after this chapter, it's where that lives. And that is very clear that it's only in effect when it's adopted by the number of states required to get the presidency, 270 electoral votes, right, if I'm not wrong. So when and if that were to occur, what this language is doing is making sure the language where our canvassing committee talks about its process reflects that language in the National Popular Vote Statute. And it does so by saying that the canvassing committee, so this is the state level one that meets at our office a week after the election. One of the offices that it's charged to certify, to canvass and certify, is the presidential elections. So in presidential years, it's doing that. And as you can see, technically what the canvassing committee does there is issue certificates of election to the electors. And that's not changing. That's what that introductory language is. It shall issue its certificates of election with respect to the presidential election to the electors nominated by the party whose candidate for president, just correcting that to capitalize it, has received the greatest number of votes. And that's what it reads right now. And obviously that current language is good as long as and until the National Popular Vote Act comes into effect. But then really this language should do what it does, which is cross-reference that act and say, except if that act has gone into effect, which is where it cites 2753I is the section that says once states equal to 270 electors have adopted it, it comes into effect. It then says the committee shall issue its certificates of election with respect to the presidential election, parroting that language up there to the electors nominated in association with the National Popular Vote winner. And you can see the important part there is as provided in subsection 2753C, which is again your existing National Popular Vote law, and it says that exact same thing. If you look at 2753C, it says the canvassing officials in each state shall certify the slate of electors associated with the party whose candidate won the National Popular Vote. So really that whole first part, I think, is just saying, acknowledging that language in the National Popular Vote Act and saying, making sure we're clear about that in our own canvassing committee section. So that's what I'd really pretty much call cleanup. Second part gets into, and so the way I like to think about this is the canvassing committee's job is to certify the slate of electors. And that's what that language dictates. Until the National Popular Vote's in effect, we're going to certify the slate of electors for the candidate who got the greatest number of votes in Vermont. Once the National Popular Vote's in effect, we'll still do that unless the National Popular Vote winner is different than the candidate who received the most votes in Vermont. Then the canvassing committee would certify those electors. Second section is about how the electors' responsibilities in casting their ballots. And if you look in, so we certify the slate, the party has nominated 3 people to be their electors. So then those 3 people are the electors who will be casting the votes on behalf of that party. Senator Rahm got the distinct privilege of doing that in the last presidential election. If you look at the current language for this section in the law, it's like 1 paragraph. So part of what Tucker's done here is broken that or Ameren, I'm sorry, has broken that paragraph down into subsections, A, B, and C. But you can see everything for the first A, B1, B2, B3 is the existing law in that section. Right now, that section ends with a single sentence that says each elector or the electors must vote for the candidates for president and vice president who receive the greatest number of votes at the general election. That also would be out of date if the National Popular Vote legislation is in place, because it mandates who we certify as electors. And then this does the job of saying who those electors then have to vote for and make sure that they vote for that party that's been certified under the National Popular Vote Act. So instead of saying they vote for the candidates for president and vice president who receive the greatest number of votes, it says they vote for the candidates for president and vice president who were nominated by the same political party or organization that nominated the elector, or for the legal successor who has replaced that candidate. That counts for if they've died or withdrawn. So this says, we previously said we would nominate the slate of electors from the party whose candidate received the National Popular Vote. And then this says those electors will cast their votes for the candidate for president and vice president that was nominated by that party. So that's really where it touches on the quote faithless elector concept, that they could go against the party that nominated them and vote for a different candidate for president or vice president. Then the language in 2 and 3, the rest of the language through the effective date is brand new and essentially clarifies the process if one of these electors does not vote for who they're supposed to vote for. And it provides for the Secretary of State to not accept those votes if they're not for the party that was nominated by that elector, not count them, and declare the seat vacant if that's the case. And then there's an appointment process for a new set of electors. I think the other two, you have to look above for how the vacancies are filled. The other electors present shall at once fill such vacancy by viva voce and by plurality of votes. My one suggestion for language cleanup is on line 7 of the last page. We think it should say the Secretary of State shall accept and count the ballots instead of cast, if somebody can make that note for Ameren. You'll see below in sub B, that's 3A. In 3B, it gets it right. The Secretary of State shall not accept and shall not count instead of cast. The Secretary is not casting the votes, the electors are casting them. It does, I suppose, substantively, it puts the Secretary of State explicitly in that position of being the entity, the person who will decide whether they voted in the correct manner or not, and gives the Secretary of State the ability to then not accept those ballots if they don't.
So the committee, do you have any questions? But I'm making this simple in my mind. The first part of it just says just clarifies the certification of the elector by the canvassing committee and cross-references it to change if the national popular vote kicks in.
Right.
Then the second section says, if national popular vote kicks in, this is how they have to vote. And then the other part of that is that the faithless elector, if Biden received the most in Vermont for the Democratic Party, and Senator Rahm decided that she really wanted to vote for Bernie Sanders. This says she has to vote for the winner. I mean, for the
Yep.
person that got, yeah. Okay.
It's pretty simple.
Great.
You said it much more simply than I did.
I have a very simple brain. Any questions? So the whole first section does nothing at all unless national popular vote kicks in. There's no change at all. And the second section just, and then the second, not section, but part about the electors is the same thing. And then the third one just codifies what we always thought was true, or many of us thought was true. So I see Senator Clarkson
That's
had her
right.
hand up, and then Senator Rahm Hinsdale.
Yeah, I don't know. I've already sort of made one mistake in the last half hour asking a question, so maybe I shouldn't, but I am, because I thought the national popular vote was, every vote, that we went. So I guess I don't understand the change in language at the bottom of page 2, top of page 3, where we're going from the greatest number of votes in the general election, which is, I thought, what the national popular vote was. And we went by vote and not by electoral college, right?
Will, do you want to?
You know what, that is,
We are
that,
getting rid of the greatest number of votes.
that's actually a good question, Senator Clarkson. And
Oh, thank you. So I
But I
did
don't-
think it's not a great question.
It's not the greatest number of votes in Vermont. In the national popular vote, it has nothing to do with the greatest number of votes in Vermont. It has to do with the greatest number of votes nationally.
Oh, okay. Well, one wouldn't know that there. One is just assuming we're talking about Vermont all the way through this, but okay, got it. Thank you. So it's at that point, we have pivoted somehow to the national vote and not the Vermont vote.
actually, if you want me to, that it takes a little bit of nuance to get into that detail, but it's a good question. That section, I should have been more clear, actually doesn't, you'll see the way it's written, doesn't matter whether or not the National Popular Vote Act is in effect yet. And I think if we had Senator Pearson here, he would probably tell us that what they figured out here was the way to craft the language that this reads right either way. Instead of relating who the elector should vote for to who received the greatest number of votes in Vermont or nationally, because that language that's stricken actually is just referring to Vermont without more there. And what it does is it just says you vote for the candidate that was nominated by the party that nominated you. And so that will apply even before the national popular vote
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
It would get away from if Senator Rahm last year, for some reason, decided to vote for President Trump as the elector, right? It would say, no, you can't do that. You have to vote for the nominee of the party, the Democratic Party in her case, that nominated her.
Or you'll
And
be
that's going to apply before and after the national
Yeah.
popular vote goes into effect. Because if you look at the top language, whether or not the national popular vote's in effect, that's related to the party. It is dependent, but it refers to the party. Before the national popular vote's in effect, it says we nominate the slate of electors that got the most votes in Vermont. And after, we nominate the slate of electors that got the most votes nationally. And in either case, those electors vote for the candidates that their party nominated.
Although in the national popular vote, they would not be voting for their party's candidate. They would be voting for whoever.
Who got the most votes?
Right.
We wouldn't be voting, right? That's
They wouldn't be voting.
No.
Exactly, Senator Rahm.
Oh, I
They
see.
wouldn't-
Because the other three.
First, you'd get the
would- Got it, got
Republican.
it, got it, got it. Yeah. Got it.
So they don't really have a job then. If the national popular vote kicks in, we've kind of gotten them, they've
just
been,
like the Republicans didn't have a job, in this last cycle. They were
Right.
they were the standby electors if their candidate won in Vermont, and they would have gone to sign for it, but obviously that was unlikely. But they are on standby. Everyone's on standby unless your candidate actually wins in the state.
So if an R and a D are running in the presidential election, and the D gets the most votes in Vermont, but the R gets the most votes nationally, once national popular vote kicks in, the D electors are out of work. They don't have anything to do. The R electors vote for that person that got the most votes nationally. That's the way national popular vote works.
And Senator Clarkson, I would say, is right. And it's that they don't have a job in either case. They don't really have a job before the national popular vote
Right.
either, because they're bound to vote for the candidates that their party nominated.
so why bother with them?
Why bother with who?
The Electoral College.
No, well, if they're not voting, I mean, no, I actually, we'll have robust, yeah, I have, anyway.
No, we're not going to take on
If
the
they
electoral
don't do
college.
anything in either case, why do we, well, anyway.
Well, you have to have the
currently, I
three
get it,
people
right.
nominated to do it in case because somebody is going to win.
Right.
So if you're nominated by the Democratic Party, if you're an elector for the Democratic Party, one of three, and the Republican gets the most votes in Vermont, the Democratic electors don't do anything.
Right,
Right.
I got that.
They
So they're
just
out of a
show
job.
up and don't vote.
They don't,
They didn't even show up.
yeah, they're just out of work.
Yeah, they are without a purpose.
And in fact, there have been protest efforts around the country where they do try and show up to vote
Right.
in this sort of protest of what election is legitimate.
So committee, are we, I did not realize that there was a suggestion for a small change here, which we can get to Ameren, but I would just love to get this off our plate.
Well, why don't we ask Ameren to make that change and have her come back tomorrow or the next day and we can quickly vote it out.
Okay, I was hoping we could vote it out today and have her make the change, but I'm willing to do that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I think it's an important enough change that you don't want to say the Secretary of State is the one casting the
No,
ballot.
we are going to make the change. I just
And it,
want to get it off
excuse
our
me.
plates.
while we're doing it, I just quickly point out, I don't know, but line 14 of the last page, she ended up with a copyright symbol instead of sub C.
Oh, yes, she did. You're right. That may
So-
have been an autocorrect kind of
I
thing.
It
hate
is.
that.
So
Yeah.
Will, would you send those 2 corrections to Ameren? And then committee, do we need more discussion on this, or can we very quickly tomorrow vote it out?
I'm for voting it out.
Sure.
Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, just to be transparent, I won't be voting yes on this. The national popular vote is tied in with it, which was passed, I believe, in 2011, and which I would not have voted for. So with that provision included, I feel like I have to vote no. It's just let you know.
Yep.
But
No,
yeah,
that's fine.
We can vote
Thank you.
today if you want. I don't,
No, I think that we'll get Ameren to make those changes.
okay.
And then I might suggest, unless somebody has a different opinion, that we might ask Senator Rom Hinsdale to report it, since if there are any questions about the Electoral College, she's in the best position to answer them.
Perfect.
True.
I mean, not the Electoral College, but the electors. Okay. All right, so I guess we will come back first thing tomorrow. I'd like to do it right away. We have ethics at 1:30. And if we can just take 5 minutes to do this, does that make sense, everybody? So we
Sure.
can get it off our plates.
Sure.
I've just become aware, see my new chart here, because we have 3 weeks left until crossover. So I'm working really hard to try to make sure that we address the issues that we wanted. And so the more we can get off our plates, the better.
Well,
Thank you.
yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. And I have to run to a chairs meeting. Is there anything else?
We have 1 minute.